I never thought I'd become the sort of woman who lies awake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the boiler hum through the walls, wondering whether the person asleep beside me might one day hurt me. Or worse, how did I end up here? Married to a man I do not trust, raising a child I am terrified might be drifting towards something dark, while my own body feels as if it is betraying me a little more every single day. And the worst part? The part that keeps circling in my head again and again is this quiet, suffocating thought. What if I cannot get out, even if I want to? I am 26 years old. I am a mum. And somewhere along the way, my life stopped feeling like it belonged to me. Before all of this, before him, my life was normal. That is the word I keep coming back to. Normal. I had mates, I had plans. I had that quiet sort of confidence that makes you believe your future is still yours to shape. I passed my driving test at 17, and I loved driving. Windows cracked open, music far too loud, streetlights sliding across the windscreen, feeling as though the whole world was open and waiting for me. I started uni at 18, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is where my life really starts. I was doing well, I had goals, I had direction. I was not rich or especially remarkable, but I was happy. Or at least, I was all right. Then I met him. He was 40. I was 18. Even saying that now makes my stomach knot, but back then, I did not see it the way I do now. He seemed settled, self-assured, the sort of man who knew exactly who he was, and I think some part of me, whether I understood it or not, was drawn to that. 3 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. Everything changed in an instant. The version of me who had plans and dreams and a future she could picture clearly, she just vanished. In her place was someone frightened, overwhelmed, clinging to anything that felt solid in a situation that was spinning out of control. At first, I told myself we could make it work, that perhaps this was simply an unconventional beginning, that perhaps love would grow, that perhaps I could still have a good life, just not the one I had imagined. But about 3.5 months into the pregnancy, things began to fracture. I will not go into every detail of that time, but I will say this. It was bad. Bad enough that I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD. Bad enough that even now, years later, certain memories still make my chest tighten and my hands tremble. We split up for a while. I thought perhaps that was the end. But when my son was about 3 months old, we got back together. And that is where the slow unraveling truly began. My husband is a liar. Not the occasional white lie. Not the kind people tell to spare someone's feelings. I mean constant, compulsive, reality-warping lies. The sort that make you question your own memory, your own judgment, your own sanity. And the strangest part? He does not even deny it. He has told me more than once that he is a narcissist, that he cannot change who he is, that it is in his blood. At first I thought that was just an excuse, a way of dodging accountability. But then I learned about his father. His father had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and he murdered not one, but 2 women, his own partners. My husband stayed in contact with him from the time he was 18, right up until he was 33. I remember the first time I found that out. I felt this cold, creeping sensation move up my spine, like something deep inside me was screaming that this was not normal, that this was not safe. And it got worse. He did not just speak to his father. He told him about our son, shared details about our child with a man who had taken lives. I was furious. I told him it made me deeply uncomfortable, that it crossed a line I could not accept. Eventually, he stopped, but it did not end there. His father began sending messages through other people, former prisoners, complete strangers, men I had never met, suddenly appearing in our lives through emails and messages, asking why my husband had cut off contact. One of them, I will never forget this, was a man convicted 3 times of sexually assaulting children. I was the one who had to ring the prison. Me, not my husband. I had to be the one to step in and shut it down, to protect what little sense of safety we had left. That should have been enough for me to leave. It should have been the moment I said, "This is too much. I'm done." But I did not, and I think about that a lot. I replay it in my head, wondering why I stayed. Was it fear? Was it denial? Was it the fact that I had a newborn baby and nowhere to go? Or was it something deeper? Something broken in me that kept hoping things would somehow improve, because they did not. Instead, the truth kept unfolding, piece by piece, and each piece was worse than the last. At some point, my husband admitted to having what he called dark sexual interests. I did not fully understand what he meant at first. I thought perhaps it was just unusual preferences. Then I found his search history. Things like drunk girls, revenge, blackmail, kidnapping, hacking. Words that made my stomach drop. Words that did not feel like fantasy, but something closer to intention. When I confronted him, he did not deny it. He did not try to soften it or explain it away. He told me, calmly, that he had felt genuine arousal at the idea of rape, that he had thought about doing it, that he had thought about doing it to women, including me. I remember sitting there, hearing those words, and feeling as though the room had gone completely silent, as if everything inside me had just frozen. My own husband, the man I lived with, the man I had a child with, admitting that. And it did not stop there. He told me that during sex, he would imagine different scenarios about me, that I was only with him for money, that I was being forced, that I did not want to be there. I felt sick, not just physically, but somewhere much deeper, in a way I still cannot properly explain, as though something sacred had been twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. After that, something inside me shut down completely. Any sense of attraction, of closeness, of connection, it was gone. But the worst confession, the one that still haunts me, came later. That he had lied to me the entire time we were together whenever I questioned the age gap between us. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. He told me that when he watched teen content, he sometimes imagined the girls were even younger. 13, 14. I asked him directly, because I needed to know, even though I did not want to hear the answer. If it were not illegal, would he go younger? And he said, probably yes. I do not think I have ever felt fear like that before. Not loud, screaming fear, not panic, but this quiet, suffocating terror. The kind that settles in your bones and never really leaves. Because him, the house, the life I was living, even myself, for staying. I remember the exact moment I realized I was not only emotionally trapped, I was physically trapped as well. It did not happen all at once. It crept in slowly, like everything else in my life. One symptom here, one awful day there, until suddenly I was not the same person anymore. Around 2020, I became really ill. At first, I thought it was just stress. I mean, how could it not be? My life was already heavy, already complicated, already full of things I did not want to think about. So when I began feeling dizzy, weak, as though my body could not keep up with me, I brushed it off. But then it got worse. My blood sugar would drop so quickly it felt as if the ground were vanishing beneath my feet. My hands would shake, my vision would blur, and there were times I genuinely thought I was about to faint. And sometimes I did. My heart would race for no reason. My chest would tighten. I would feel a wave of heat rush through me, followed by cold sweats that soaked through my clothes. The nausea would hit so hard I could barely stand upright. And then came the panic attacks. Not the sort people talk about casually. Not just feeling anxious or overwhelmed. I mean full body, all-consuming panic. Like my brain was screaming that I was about to die, even when I was simply sat in my own front room. I was eventually diagnosed with POTS, PMDD, PTSD, and an anxiety disorder. Each one felt like another weight added to something I was already struggling to carry. Driving, something I used to love. I cannot even do it now. The idea of being far from home, of having an episode and not being able to get help, it terrifies me. I barely leave the house anymore. Sometimes I stand by the front door, hand on the handle, telling myself, just go outside, just take one step, and my body just will not move. It is like being trapped inside myself. 10 days before my period, everything gets worse. The symptoms spike so badly it feels unbearable. The hot flushes, the nausea, the headaches, the anxiety. It all hits at once, like my body is attacking me from the inside out. My GP also suspects I have PCOS, which only adds another layer of uncertainty to everything. And the truth is, I do not feel as though I have a life anymore. I wake up every day already exhausted, already overwhelmed, already dreading the hours ahead. It does not feel like living. It feels like surviving something I cannot escape. And that is the part that makes everything else even harder. Because if I were healthy, if I had the strength, the stability, the ability to stand on my own 2 feet, leaving him would be easier. But I do not. I have never had a job. Not because I did not want one, but because life just never went that way. And now, in the state I am in, I cannot even imagine how I would manage one. Meanwhile, my husband earns a lot of money. Around £160,000 a year. From the outside, our life looks perfect. We have a beautiful newly built house, 2 brand new cars, good private medical cover, no obvious signs of struggle. If you saw us from the outside, you would probably think I was lucky, and that thought alone makes me feel even more trapped. Because how do you explain to people that you are suffering when everything looks fine? He does not control the finances directly. He does not lock me out of bank accounts or refuse me access to money. But I know, deep down, that the money is part of what keeps me here. It is like this invisible safety net that also doubles as a cage. Because where would I go without it? How would I survive? How would I take care of my son? And that is the other part of this story. The part that keeps me awake even more than everything else. My son. I love him more than anything in this world. That sort of love is hard to explain unless you have felt it. It is not just affection. It is this overwhelming, instinctive need to protect, to nurture, to keep him safe no matter what. But lately, I have been frightened, not of him, but for him. When he was in reception, he started saying things that did not feel normal for a child his age. One day, he came home and told me that he had spent the whole day thinking about killing a girl in his class, a girl he had a crush on. I remember feeling as though all the air had been sucked out of the room. I did not shout. I did not panic in front of him. I just calmly asked questions, trying to understand, trying to keep my voice steady while my heart was pounding. But inside, I was terrified. I got him help straight away. They put him on medication and diagnosed him with ADHD. And for a while, things seemed to settle. The thoughts went away. His behavior improved. I let myself believe perhaps this was just a phase. Perhaps we had caught it early. Perhaps everything would be all right. But when he went back to school for year 1, it started again. This time, it was not just one girl. There were 2 others. And then, me. He started saying he was scared he might hurt someone, that he had thoughts about killing people, that he had imagined hurting me with scissors. Hearing your own child say that to you, it does something to you. It does not only frighten you, it shakes something deep inside your identity as a parent. Because suddenly, you are not only worried about the world hurting your child, you are worried about your child hurting the world, or himself, or you. I sought more help, more opinions. One doctor told me that ADHD alone could not explain those thoughts, that it might be something more serious. Another said it could be a combination of ADHD and OCD. Different answers. No certainty, just more questions. Right now, I am homeschooling him. And the thoughts, they have stopped. At least for now. He is on guanfacine, and overall his behavior is more stable. But there are still moments, little things, that feel off. Small behaviors I cannot quite explain. Tiny glimpses that make my stomach tighten. I want him to go back to school. I want him to have a normal life, to make friends, to grow up in a healthy environment. But I am scared. Scared of what might happen. Scared of what could be inside him. Scared of how much of his father might be in him. Because my husband once told me that when he was a child, not much older than our son, he had thought about bringing a bomb to school. And I cannot stop thinking about that. It is as though everything is connected in some way I do not fully understand, but cannot ignore. And all of it, all of this, is happening while I am barely holding myself together. There are days when I struggle just to manage basic things. Cooking, cleaning, keeping the house running. I do everything I can, but it feels as though I am constantly running on empty. I clean. I hoover. I do the washing. I change the bedding. I try to maintain some sense of order, some sense of control, in a life that feels completely out of control. But inside, I am falling apart. I do not feel safe in my own home. I do not feel safe in my own body. And that fear, it has turned into something else. Agoraphobia. The world outside feels too big, too unpredictable, too dangerous. So I stay indoors, even though indoors does not feel safe either. It is like there is nowhere left for me to go. And sometimes I think about leaving anyway, just taking my son and running. But then reality hits. How would I manage? What if I have an episode while I am out? What if I cannot take care of him properly? What if I make things worse? And then there is the guilt, the crushing, overwhelming guilt, because part of me has even thought about just disappearing, about ending everything. And the moment I realized I was capable of thinking that, I knew something inside me had reached its limit. I do not recognize myself anymore. I do not recognize my life, and I do not know what I am supposed to do next. I do not think there was one single moment where everything collapsed. It was more like I woke up one day and realized I had been living in a slow motion collapse for years, and I had finally run out of strength to pretend I could hold it all together. There are nights, more often than I care to admit, when the house is completely quiet. My son is asleep in his room, the lights are off, and I am lying there in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat. And I think about everything at once. About the man next to me, who has admitted out loud that he has thought about hurting women. That he has thought about hurting me. About the child down the hall, who once told me he was afraid he might hurt someone. Or me. About my own body, which feels as though it could betray me at any moment, collapse, panic, shut down. And in those moments, I feel this overwhelming sense of being surrounded, like there is danger in every direction, and I am standing in the middle of it with nowhere to go. I try to tell myself I am overreacting, that perhaps I am connecting things that should not be connected, that perhaps I am simply tired, overwhelmed, ill. But then I remember the things that were actually said, the things that were not imagined, and that quiet voice inside me, the one I have tried to ignore for so long, keeps whispering the same thing. This is not safe. There was one moment recently that I have not been able to shake. We were in the kitchen. It was nothing special, just an ordinary day. I was cleaning, trying to keep myself busy, trying to stay grounded. He walked in behind me. I did not even hear him at first, and then suddenly, he was close. Too close. There was no immediate threat. He did not touch me. He did not say anything violent, but my body reacted before my mind could catch up. My chest tightened, my hands froze, my breathing turned shallow, because all I could think about was everything he had told me. And for a split second, just a split second, I wondered what would happen if he decided to act on those thoughts. I turned round quickly, trying to keep my face neutral, trying not to show fear. He just looked at me, completely normal, as though nothing was wrong. And that almost made it worse, because how do you live with someone who can say those things and then just go back to being normal? How do you relax around that? You do not. You cannot. And I think that was when it truly hit me. I am not just unhappy. I am not just struggling. I am living in a constant state of tension, waiting for something that may or may not happen, but knowing that if it does, I might not be able to stop it. And then there is my son. I watch him sometimes when he does not know I am looking, playing quietly, laughing, just being a child. And then there are moments, small ones, where his expression changes, where he says something slightly off, or there is this flicker in his behavior that I cannot quite explain, and I feel that same fear creep back in, not because I believe he is dangerous, but because I do not understand what is happening inside him, and I do not know whether I am enough in my current state to guide him through it. I have tried to stay strong for him. I really have. I have kept the house clean. I have made sure he eats. I have homeschooled him, sat with him, listened to him, comforted him when he is frightened by his own thoughts. I have done everything I can. But there are days when I feel as though I am hanging on by a thread. Days when getting out of bed feels like climbing a mountain. Days when my body is so exhausted, so overwhelmed, that I do not even feel real. And on those days, the thoughts get louder, the ones I do not want to admit out loud, the ones that frighten me just as much as everything else. What if I cannot do this anymore? What if I am not strong enough? What if the only way to escape all of this is to stop existing inside it? I hate that I have thought that. I hate that my mind has gone there, but I think it matters that I say it, because that is how I know I have reached my limit. That is how I know this is not something I can just push through anymore. I have spent years trying to endure, trying to rationalize, trying to hold everything together for the sake of my family. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, at what cost? Because staying is not neutral. Staying is doing something. It is choosing to remain in a situation that feels unsafe. It is choosing to keep absorbing stress, fear, uncertainty. It is choosing to slowly lose yourself piece by piece. And I think, deep down, I already know the truth. I just do not know how to act on it. Because leaving is not just a decision. It is a risk. It is stepping into the unknown with a body that does not cooperate, with no financial independence, with a child who needs stability, with fear following you every step of the way. It is terrifying. But staying is slowly breaking me, and I do not know how much more I can take. Sometimes I sit there and imagine what my life would look like if I left. A small place, quiet, just me and my son. No tension in the air, no underlying fear, no constant second guessing, just peace. And then reality creeps back in. What if I cannot afford it? What if I cannot physically manage it? What if I fail him? And then I am right back where I started, frozen, stuck between two choices that both feel impossible. I am still trying to process all of this. I keep going back and forth in my head, weighing everything up, questioning myself, wondering what the right thing to do even is anymore. If you were in my position, what would you do? I do not know if there is ever a neat ending to a story like this. No moment where everything suddenly makes sense, where all the fear vanishes, where you wake up and realize the nightmare is over. But there was a moment, quiet, almost insignificant, that changed something inside me. It was not dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation, no huge event. It was early in the morning. The house was still. My son was asleep, and I was sitting alone in the front room, wrapped in a blanket, staring out of the window. The light was only just beginning to come in, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself stop thinking about everyone else. Not my husband, not my son, not what other people would say, just me. And I asked myself something I had been avoiding for years. If nothing changes, what does my life look like in 5 years? The answer came faster than I expected. The same house, the same fear, the same tightness in my chest, the same feeling of being trapped in a life that does not feel safe. And something about that realization, it did not only scare me, it exhausted me, because I could suddenly see it so clearly. This was not a phase. This was not something that would simply sort itself out if I waited long enough, if I tried hard enough, if I endured just a little bit more. This was my life, unless I did something about it. I remember looking down at my hands. They were shaking slightly, as they always do when my anxiety starts creeping up. And instead of trying to calm myself down, I just sat with it. I let the fear be there, because for once, it did not feel like something I needed to suppress. It felt like information, like my body was trying to tell me something I had been ignoring. You are not safe. That thought did not come from panic. It came from clarity. And right behind it, another thought followed. You do not deserve to live like this. I do not know why that hit me as hard as it did. Maybe because I had spent so long minimizing everything, telling myself it was not that other people had it worse, that I ought to be grateful for what I had. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Because the truth is, fear does not have to reach some extreme level to be valid. It does not have to escalate into something irreversible for it to be real. And I realized something else as well. If I stay, my son grows up in this environment, even if nothing physical ever happens, even if the worst case scenarios never come true. He is still growing up in a home where tension is constant, where his mom is afraid, where something feels off, and children pick up on that. They always do. And suddenly, the question shifted. It was not only about what I could handle. It was about what I was teaching him to accept. That thought stayed with me all day. It followed me while I cleaned the kitchen, while I folded washing, while I helped him with his schoolwork. And every time I looked at him, I felt this mixture of love and urgency, because he deserves better. Not a perfect life, but a safe one. And maybe, just maybe, so do I. I am not going to sit here and pretend that I suddenly became fearless. I did not. I am still scared. I am still overwhelmed. I still do not have all the answers. But something inside me shifted from I cannot leave. I do not know how yet, but I need to. And that is a different kind of thought. It is not a solution, but it is a direction. Since that morning, I have started doing small things, quiet things, things no one else would notice. I have started paying more attention to resources, looking into what support systems might exist, thinking about what steps I would need to take if I decided to leave. I have not made any big moves yet, but for the first time in a very long time, I am not completely frozen, and that matters. Because being stuck, that is what was breaking me most of all. Feeling like there was no way out. Like no matter what I did, I was trapped. But perhaps that is not entirely true. Perhaps the way out is not one big decision. Perhaps it is a series of small ones. One step, then another, then another. Until one day, you look back and realize You are not where you used to be anymore. I do not know what is going to happen next. I do not know how long it will take. I do not know what obstacles I will face. But I do know this. I cannot keep pretending this is all right. I cannot keep ignoring the part of me that knows something is wrong. And I cannot keep sacrificing my sense of safety, my sanity, my life, just to maintain something that was never truly stable to begin with. I am still trying to process all of this, still trying to work out what my next step is. But I think, for the first time, I am actually asking the right questions. What kind of life do I want? What kind of environment does my son need? And what am I willing to do to make that happen? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? I am not looking for perfect answers, just perspective. Let me know in the comments. And if you want to follow whatever comes next, make sure you subscribe.